boys. It's Granny. I'm getting ready to read you a story. It's called Curious George Goes Camping. Had a little technical difficulty earlier today when I tried to film this, so hopefully it'll go well this time. And it'll be a little bit better so I can upload it. But your dad is going to show you, or your mom's going to show you the book on their device, because I don't have a book to hold up. I'm reading this off of my Kindle because I checked this out of the library onto my Kindle. So I don't have an actual book, but Mommy and Daddy can show you the pictures on their device. So we're going to start out with the first page, and you should see a picture of George, and he's standing there with what looks like a sleeping bag. And he's standing behind a man. We don't see the top part of the man, but we do see his legs. So that's the page we're starting on. This is George. He was a good little monkey and always very curious. This weekend, George and his friend, the man with the yellow hat, had special plans. They were going camping. Let's turn the page. At the campsite, the man with the yellow hat unpacked their gear while George looked at all the tents. He saw tents for big families and just one the right size for a puppy. There were even tents on wheels. Do you see the tent for the puppy? Can you find the one with the puppy? Do you see the one with wheels? That would be a camper. This kind of looks to me like a pop-up camper over there on the left side of the screen. And that's what, when Granny went camping when she was a little girl, that's what they used. Would you like to help me put up our tent, George? The man asked. Here we're going to turn the page. George was happy to help. It would not be hard to set up a tent, he thought, but it wasn't easy. George, why don't you fill our bucket with some water at the pump? His friend suggested. We'll need it by our campfire later when we roast marshmallows. Marshmallows. George loved marshmallows. He couldn't wait to try them roasted. Now, don't wander off and get into trouble, the man warned. But George did not hear him. He was already gone. I think you can see he's back in the distance with that bucket. Let's turn the page. At the pump, George worked the handle up and down. Soon his bucket was full. On the way back down the trail, he saw a family packing up. George watched a girl pour her bucket of water on a campfire. The fire sizzled out. George thought, hey, that looks fun. He poured his bucket of water on the next campfire. Hey, yelled the camper. We were not finished with that yet. The camper began to chase George, but George didn't mean to cause trouble. Now he only wanted to hide. He ran into the forest as fast as he could, but the camper's footsteps followed close behind. George ran faster and faster. The footsteps came closer and closer until suddenly, let's turn the page, they were passing George. Why, it was not a camper chasing George now. It was a deer. What fun to run with a deer. Forgetting all about the camper and the marshmallows, George ran after the deer. But a little monkey cannot run as fast as a deer in the woods. Before long, George was lost and all alone. He felt tired and stopped to rest. At first he was worried. He was very far from camp. But there were lots, let's turn the page, of other animals to keep him company. He saw a lizard running on a rock and a squirrel chattering in a tree. Then he saw a trail of black and white kitty, the tail of a black and white kitty peeking out from under a bush. He was curious. Would the kitty like to play? George gently pulled the kitty out. You can see all the wild animals in the forest on this page. Let's turn the page and see about this kitty. Oh, but it's not a kitty. It was a skunk, and it was scared. The skunk lifted its tail, and it sprayed. Phew! The spray smelled awful. The animals tried to get away. George wanted to get away too, but he could not. The smell was all over him. How could he ever get rid of this awful smell, he wondered. Too bad he could not take a bath in the woods. And if you look on the picture with him running, George running away, you could see all the animals are kind of passed out, and even the flower has wilted from the smell. Let's turn the page. Then George had an idea. He would wash the smell off in the creek. George jumped into the cold water. He splashed and he scrubbed, but he was still smelly. And now he was wet too. But what could he do? George thought and thought. If he climbed up a tree to dry off, would the smell blow away? No, even dry and high up in the tree, George did not smell better. Poor George. He wished he hadn't wandered so far from camp. He wished he were roasting marshmallows with his friend. Suddenly, George heard footsteps heading toward him. Someone was coming. Let's turn the page. It was the forest animals. But they ran right by him. They had seen something scary, and George saw it too. It was a fire. George had gotten into trouble for putting out one fire, but this fire wasn't in the campground. This was an emergency. Quickly, George climbed down the tree and grabbed his bucket. He scooped it full of water in the creek. Then, being careful not to spill, he climbed back up and swung from branch to branch through the trees. Let's turn the page. When George got close enough to the fire, he reached down and poured the water on the flames. Out went the fire with a big hiss. Just then, George's friend rushed out of the forest with a ranger. "George," he called, "I was afraid you'd be here." "It's a good thing you were here, George," the ranger said. "We saw smoke from the campground, but you put this fire out just in time." George was glad to help, and the man with the yellow hat was glad to see that George was safe. But he had a funny look on his face. "George," he asked, "what is that smell?" Let's turn the page. Back at the campsite, George's friend helped him get rid of the awful smell. After a strange bath in tomato juice, George smelled fine. I've heard of bathing in tomato juice for skunk spray. Then we look at the page where they're roasting the marshmallow. He's finally getting to try a roasted marshmallow. Then the man with the yellow hat had invited the ranger to cook dinner with them over their own small fire. "Campfires can be nice if you're careful," said the ranger. Let's turn the page. George agreed, especially for roasting marshmallows. He's got a big smile on his face and looks like he's going to enjoy those roasted marshmallows. I hope you enjoyed the story, boys. This one I got from Chesterfield County Library, and I think your dad either got your copy from the Montgomery Library or from the Blacksburg Library. And hopefully, little Sam's parents can download a copy from the library as well. And they can enjoy the story too. Okay, that's all for now. I'll send you another book later. Bye-bye.